Today's video feels kind of emotional for me. This channel kind of was just getting started back when I bought my 12.9-inch iPad Pro in November of 2015, right when it was brand new and it was cool. It was the first time we'd ever seen an iPad at this size. I was crazy excited for it. At the time, I didn't even own a laptop, and I thought this was going to be what I edited my videos on, and a lot of my first big videos on this channel ever were on iMovie and edited on here. I filmed them with my DSLRs, but this iPad has carried us through a lot of this channel's history. I've had it for a very long time, and now the day has finally come when I have something to compare it to that is clearly better. I know the title says Versus, but come on. The 2017 10.5-inch iPad is clearly better than my 2015 12.9-inch, but let's compare them anyway. So I think if you were ever looking at both of these, this being used because I don't even think you can get this model from Apple anymore, and this being brand new and just coming out, the first thing I think everyone is going to notice is promotion. It's very hard to show you what that is in a video because it's something you have to see on your own eyes, and it's only noticeable on this display. Whatever video you're watching this on, it's not going to convey it very easily. So I compared the refresh rates on both of these tablets at 240 frames per second with my iPhone 7 Plus, and this gives you a better idea of what promotion means. It means the refresh rate on the newer one, which is at 120 hertz, which by the way is incredibly high for a tablet. That's overkill. I don't know of any other tablet that's been able to do that, but it means the response time on the touchscreen is incredibly fast. Now, in person, using both of these on a day-to-day basis, you would notice the refresh rate on this one compared to this one, which is at 60. The display is more responsive, and it's very hard to articulate, but it just feels more clean, it feels more natural, and I'm honestly kind of frustrated because now that we have 120 hertz on one device that we own, it starts to make everything else you have look crappy. Now my iPhone feels kind of laggy because I'm getting used to 120 hertz. Now my iPad Pro, which I used for 2 years and I've enjoyed very thoroughly, it's been a great iPad. Now I look at it and go, oh, the refresh rate is kind of laggy now. So the Pro Motion feature is kind of so good it's bad. I don't know what you want to say. It's probably what it would be like if you watched 4K TV for a long time and then downgraded to 1080p. You'd be like, oh, I'm not used to it being this low. Nevertheless, it takes a well-trained eye to notice the difference. I noticed my girlfriend and my father, they couldn't really tell the difference between the refresh rates, but I could, probably because I'm a filmmaker and I work with 60 frames per second video and watch 24 frames a second movies and 30 frames a second YouTube videos, so I notice a change in frame rate, which is why on the 10.5-inch iPad, it wins the first round clearly. The next thing that this iPad has that this one doesn't was the True Tone display. Back when this iPad Pro came out, there was no such thing. The True Tone display was introduced on the 9.7-inch iPad Pro about 3 months later when Apple had a keynote in March. Also introduced at that keynote was the 256 gigabyte version, which back when I bought this, 128 gigs was the maximum. You had 32 or 128. There were only two options, but then later in 2016, they added the 256 gigabyte version of this. So unfortunately, I was stuck with 128, but that's still plenty. For casual use, you're almost never going to fill it. I definitely never filled it on this. And to go even more overkill, on the new iPads, we have the option of going to 512 gigabytes. Over half a terabyte. I don't know why Apple did that, but I'm definitely okay with it because I read a lot of your comments that say, how are you ever gonna fill up 512 gigs? And I always respond the same way, you don't. That's the beautiful thing about storage capacity. If it's super big, you don't have to worry about it. Essentially, when they made a half terabyte iPad, they said, what if they just didn't have to worry about storage? Which I appreciate them doing. I like it when they go overkill. That's likely the one word I would use to describe this iPad is overkill. Now, Apple upgraded the cameras on the new 10.5-inch iPad quite a bit, but comparing them to my 2015 iPad Pro, it's not super noticeable, to be honest. Yes, now you can film at 1080 at 60, so that's great. And yes, now you can film at 4K, whereas the 2015 one has an 8 megapixel camera capable of shooting 1080p at 30 frames a second. That's it. Very, very basic camera, and the front-facing camera is even worse at 5 megapixels, whereas now they put the same cameras that the iPhone 7 has, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I totally could be, but off the top of my head, I believe the front-facing is now 7 megapixels, and the rear is 8 or 12? I forget, but don't measure your camera quality in megapixels. It typically doesn't have that much to do with it. This camera is clearly better because it has optical image stabilization, which again, this one only has digital, so footage is gonna look a lot smoother on this. This one also has flash, that is of course True Tone. You can see the 4 different light sensors in the flash, as well as that front-facing feature they added on the iPhone 6s. Now when you're taking a front-facing photo, photo, the display will flash and act as a front-facing flash. And overall, selfies, video, whatever you want to do, it's gonna look better on this one. However, I'm not saying this camera is awful. It's a little dated and it doesn't have those higher quality format options like 60 frames a second or 240 FPS slow-mo, which this does, but I think this is held up pretty okay, given we don't like to take tons of videos and pictures with our tablets. Now, going back to the True Tone display, I have not used one until recently, and I've had this for about 24 hours now. I can't decide if I like it or not, because I know what they're going for. It's trying to match the color tone of the room you're in. I just feel like that's something they added, and it's not really a problem, because yes, regular displays like this one are rather blue when you compare them to other things, but I feel like, for me at least, I wasn't complaining a lot about the color temperature of my display. However, I bring that up because I get comments and people tweeting me all the time that are mentioning that True Tone display is the standalone reason they got the new iPad Pros. It apparently helps their eyes relax a little bit when they're using their tablets, and it's more comfortable for them to look at. So I'm just gonna say, I hope they add True Tone to anything, because I don't mind it. It's not distracting to me. When I'm using it, I'm not like, yeah, True Tone. But then again, when I go back to my iPhone or I go back to this iPad, I'm not disgusted by the blue color temperature. I just feel like that's what we're used to and it's fine. But if it does help some of you out there, then sure, True Tone is great. I would like to mention that the speakers on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro do sound a lot better, but I think that's just due to size alone, whereas this, it has 4 speakers, they're stereo and they're very good, but just not quite as loud and probably not as clear as I got on this one. So that's a little bit of a downgrade, but I rarely find myself listening to music through the iPad speakers. This is more just for like videos occasionally, and the speakers on this thing are good. They're just not as great as this one's. However, that comes into a different field when we want to compare portability. Obviously, the winner's going to this guy because I've noticed it is a lot thinner than the 2015 iPad Pro, which I didn't know they were changing. So not only in just sheer size does this one win, but also it's surprising how light it is when you first pick it up. You grab it and it comes up and you really aren't expecting it to be so easy to hold. I'm loving this design element. If we're comparing display sizes, obviously pixels per inch are about the same, but you know, clearly the 12.9-inch iPad provides you with more display size. But the reason I didn't go with the 12.9-inch iPad Pro for 2017 was because footprint wise, it looks essentially the same. You get a flash on the back, you get a camera bulge, but other than that, it's not a very original design. It's the same iPad we've seen for the past 2 years. Not too much has changed. And what I really love about the 10.5-inch is the fact that they changed the size of the iPad slightly, but they also reduced the bezels to a place where you can still have grip on the sides so that your fingers aren't covering the display or anything, but it still has a fresh, new, clean design that's noticeable. As in, as soon as you see this iPad, you know it's the 2017 one. That wouldn't have happened if I got the 12.9-inch version. It's the same bezels, same screen size, where this mixes it up a little bit, as well as the fact that there's some big, stupid companies out there like Facebook and Google who still haven't optimized all their apps for this display. Facebook is still not optimized for the iPad, and this thing has been around for 2 years and they haven't optimized it yet. YouTube Creator Studio still doesn't support split screen or the sheer size. So it made sense for me to go back to kind of a smaller form factor where that doesn't matter as much. Facebook Creator Studio, they're a little blurry on here, but barely noticeable. I have the same sized keyboard across all of my apps. Whereas on this, the iPad keyboard changes a lot. And that's not the iPad's fault, it's the third-party developer's fault, but still, I enjoy having this little portable guy that's not quite as large as my laptop, because that's what I noticed with having this in my ecosystem. I have a MacBook Pro with a very large display, 15 inches, and then I have this with 13 inches. So it's kind of redundant having both of these, but now that I have something that's in between my cell phone and my MacBook, I love this thing. And I think Apple was very smart to add that ProMotion feature as well as True Tone, because now the iPad lineup now has something it desperately needed: exclusives. You now have this beautiful way of multitasking in iOS 11 that's just on the iPad. You also have this incredible, smooth, butter-like looking display at 120 hertz on here that you're not going to get on your MacBook. You're not going to get that on your iPhone. They made that unique to this, which is why if you're in an Apple ecosystem and you come up to this in an Apple store and you look at it, it kind of feels separate now from the other lineups. A lot of people were complaining that the iPad lineup is essentially just big iPhones, and in a lot of ways that's true, but I think that with the new 2017 iPad Pro, it's kind of separating itself. It's like, look what I can do and what your iPhone can't and what your Mac can't. Whole incredible possibilities with the Apple Pencil, which still works great. In fact, it works better on here now because of that new refresh rate. The Apple Pencil Pencil is incredibly responsive on here. This camera has stuff that your MacBook definitely can't do. 4K video, optical image stabilization, 1080p at 60 frames a second. All of the photos on here are now live photos, which I love. HDR support, so you're getting these great camera features that your iPhone has, but on a bigger display so that you can see these videos and pictures in their full absolute quality, but also getting that iOS optimization that you see on your iPhone. Just brought to a bigger display that has tons of multitasking capabilities. So that's why, yes, when you're comparing these two, to no surprise, the 10.5-inch iPad Pro wins, and I hope this helped you understand why I didn't go for the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It's a little redundant having this and my MacBook. They're both kind of the same size, and carrying both around is a little tedious. And before you ask, no, I sadly cannot do giveaways yet, so I won't be giving this away. I'm going to be selling it, and if you're interested in buying it, tag me on Twitter. But regardless, I love the new redesign they brought to the iPad. I think this is exactly what it needed. My only complaints with it are very small things, like Apple, it'd be great if you could remove the camera bulge, please. This is a little distracting. Or if you're using the same cameras that the iPhone 7 has, mold the aluminum around the camera bulge like the iPhone 7 did. That way this would have a bit more of a unique design. You could look at it and say, that's the 2017 iPad Pro. Why didn't you introduce this in matte black so it could match our iPhones? Or product red even, now that you've got a product red iPhone. Provide some more color options with the iPad. There's only 4 for this version, and for the 12.9 there's only 3. Also, the charger could be Lightning to USB-C. They even talked about that in their keynote, but it's not included in the box. You only get Lightning to USB. It sucks. Remove the headphone jack because screw you guys. But all of these things are very small. I'm very pleased with it, especially with the promotion feature. It is making me want to stop using my iPhone a lot and switch to this because it looks so smooth. It's like, well, I could browse Twitter or text people from my iPhone, but I want to use the new iPad. So that is your comparison with the two. That's all the changes I've been noticing. Let me know your thoughts on the 10.5-inch iPad Pro of 2017, which I am very, very pleased with and excited to make a part of my daily tech life. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.